Greetings, friends, and welcome to another ministry of the Victory Hour. My name is Jim Gallagher. I am the pastor at Clayville Assembly, who's responsible for bringing to you this YouTube channel, and welcome to our channel. I have, by the way, you want to contact me, my email is info@clayvilleassembly.com. You can write to me through the mail. It still exists. We have an address. Mail it to you can mail it to Clayville Assembly or the Victory Hour, P.O. Box 222, Foster, Rhode Island, 02825. Now, next time we meet, I'm going to talk about my call to the ministry. All right? I'll just take one day to talk about that. And then whether I do something for a day or two, maybe, maybe not, but then we're going to begin the process of explaining how can it be, as you contend, that Christ returned in the first century? How can that be? Here you've been shown how everywhere in the New Testament, Jesus said that he would return in the first century. It was stated over and over and over. And the apostles in their epistles stated over and over and over and over, directly and indirectly, but clearly and distinctly and unequivocally. Okay, but how can that be? We'll start that process. I know lots of people are waiting for that. We'll be doing that. Lord willing, of course. But I'm interrupting my schedule for one more day to continue my thoughts on Joe Biden's proclamation of Transgender Day of Visibility for 2024. You know, when I first heard that report, I heard it was, the news reported it as it was a Virginia county. The Virginia County Democrats declared Easter, unless I didn't even mention that the last time, they did it on Easter. For Easter Sunday, they declared it Transgender Day of Visibility on Easter. Do you think that's a coincidence? No, it isn't. Now, the International Transgender Day of Visibility is on March 29th every year. So, obviously, in those terms, it changes, the day changes every year, right? It's not always on Sunday, so it isn't always on Easter Sunday. I understand that. But what I can't figure out is, it sounds like, to me, that Virginia County maybe never officially recognized it, and they recognized it for the first time on the year that it fell on Easter. Now, is the federal government recognizing Transgender Day of Visibility for the first time? Maybe so. And if so, they did it the first time on Easter. Regardless of all that, a proclamation on Transgender Day of Visibility, do they really need more visibility? Do we really want to see that? No, we don't. Now, I brought to you from God's Word. The transgenders, the men want to be women. The women want to be men. The men put on women's clothes. The women put on men's clothes. And what does God say? In his law, his holy law, Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 5, the woman shall not wear that which pertaineth unto a man. Neither shall a man put on a woman's garment. For all that do so are abomination unto the Lord thy God. It's an abomination in the eyes of God. God gives life. These people are rebelling against their own anatomy. There's something wrong. I told you about how the American Psychiatric Association used to recognize homosexuality as a psychological disorder. It was in their list of disorders. In the 70s, it was removed from their list of disorders because of political pressure, not scientific findings. And as a result, the medical community looked with disdain on the psychiatric community as a little bit more quackery than they originally thought that they were. because it wasn't based on hard science. But now COVID goes to show and to make manifest that the medical community buckled to political pressure. Under COVID, with the shots and all this stuff, and the tyranny and the impositions that made no medical sense. So now, who has egg on their face? Well, now it's the medical community. They did just like the psychiatrists did back in the 70s. And Freudism teaches the reason there's so many bad people and bad things happening in the world, and the reason there's bad people is because people are sexually repressed by Christianity. So what is the way to heal them? Oh, I should have. Can I get it up on my phone so you can see it? Let me see if I can do this. There's an article. Oh, I don't know if this is even going to show. Are you going to be able to see my phone? There's an article that was in the Atlantic. Was it the Atlantic Monthly? Isn't that what it is? Or is it just the Atlantic? The article is entitled, I'm sorry. I was wrong. It was in the New Yorker. I thought it was the Atlantic. It's in the New Yorker. And you can write this down because you might not believe it. The title of the article is The German Experiment That Placed Foster Children with Pedophiles. The article is by Rachel Aviv, July 19th, 2021. I don't know if you see this. Can you see that? Oh, that's not too bad. Get out of here with that. Okay. The German experiment that placed foster children with pedophiles. You see that? It's the New Yorker. Get that out of there. And if you can't get the whole picture, and the picture on it shows an adult hand on the shoulder of a young child looking somewhat scared. And the article is showing how the psychiatrists, starting in the 60s, going all the way to the 1990s, they were taking children and putting them in foster homes where they knew the foster parent was a homosexual pedophile. And they wanted these men to have sexual relation with these young boys, to bring sexual freedom and to free them from the repression, but only if it's consensual. You can't have consensual sexual relations with a minor as an adult, particularly a foster parent. And the government of Germany knew that's what they were doing. And we're talking like 100,000 children spread out over 30,000 homes for decades. This isn't like in the 1700s, 1960s to the 1990s. And that all stemmed from, well, the Holocaust. And look what Germany did. So there's something wrong. Well, how could we get to the point where there's something wrong? And the psychiatrist said, well, I've got a theory. It's sexual repression. If we have sexual liberation, then people will be free from that repression, which makes them angry and divisive and warlike. And then there'll be just love and peace everywhere as soon as we start having sex with children. I mean, this is the 60s to the 90s. And so now, what do we have in American public schools? Letting these trans people come in and groom them and giving them porn and filth to our little children, starting in elementary school. This has to stop. I was reading to you from the Communist Manifesto, where Karl Marx is saying we got to get rid of the family. Rome fell because of the breakup of pater familias. And historians will teach that. Pater familias, it's the authority of the father in the home. He was the centerpiece of home life. And with a strong father, you had a strong family unit, then you had a strong nation. That's how they viewed it. Of course, Rome going a little bit overboard with that. Well, quite a bit overboard, actually. But there's a truth to the principle, though. And many historians have concluded that the ultimate reason that Rome fell is because of the diminishing of the authority of the father, and they became very permissive. And then licentious and hedonistic, and then it's the corruption of society. We're watching ourselves do that right now. I read to you from the Communist Manifesto where Karl Marx said, abolition of the family. Even the most radical flare up at this infamous proposal of the communists. Oh, Marx is telling you, we propose the destruction of the family unit. Are you willing to live with that? Because that's where this White House crowd of these woke leftists that are running us now, that's where they're bringing us. You do see that. School board meeting. Father gets up to read the porn and filth that Junior has in elementary school in the books in the library. And then they say, oh, no, you can't read that. You can't read that. It's too off color in this school board meeting of adults. Well, then why are our children exposed to it? Oh, you want to ban books? No one's talking about banning books. But look, are you going to put Playboy and Penthouse out in the library for kids to look at? Maybe the little young boys can go and look and stare at all the pictures? Well, you don't want to ban books, right? Banning books. They're liars. They're not talking about book banning. They're talking about you have to censor what little children can read. And then Marx says we need to replace home education with social. He says, but you will say, we destroy the most hallowed of relations when we replace home education by social. See, home education. So when Marx wrote this in the middle 1800s, that's how most people educated their children, in the home. Very biblical. Ye fathers, raise up your children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Fathers were to instruct their children in the matters of the law. And then he talks about using his words, the bourgeois claptrap about the family and education, about the hollowed correlation of parent and child. He thinks it's bourgeois claptrap to consider the relationship between a child and their parents as hollowed. That's garbage, says Karl Marx. He says the bourgeois claptrap about the family and education, about the hollowed correlation of parent and child, becomes all the more disgusting. He thinks it's disgusting. All the more disgusting, the more by the action of modern industry. All family ties among the proletarians are torn asunder, and their children transformed into simple articles of commerce and instruments of labor. Like they don't want to do that with the children and pretend they're not doing it. That's exactly their plan. They want to do exactly what they're claiming the capitalists are doing, but they want to do it to the nth degree by government power. And then the next page, I'm reading from the Communist Manifesto. Bourgeois marriage is in reality a system of wives in common, and thus, at the most, what the communists might possibly be reproached with is that they desired to introduce, in substitution for a hypocritically concealed and openly legalized community of women. In other words, amongst you capitalists, you're all wife swapping and committing adultery, and so why don't we just get rid of marriage anyway, because, that's what you're doing anyway. We're just going to be more honest about it. And guess what? Well, that's the direction we're going in. A lot of young people, almost nobody gets married nowadays. You go to the average hospital, ask them what percentage of the births are from married couples. only a small portion. The numbers may vary depending on the location of the hospital, to be sure. But my daughter worked in a hospital. She told me that's what it was. It was something like, 80% of the births are from unwed mothers. Yep, the Marxists are having their way. And that's because the public school system has been promoting this Marxism and the destruction of the family unit in order to have socialism and a new world order constructed over the dreams of Karl Marx. Now, for instance, John Dewey. John Dewey, the founding father of America's progressive public educational system. That's John Dewey. He's the founding father of America's progressive educational system, what we have now. And just to give you a little, you've all heard the name John Dewey, right? He's a famous educator, a great man, a scholar. Here's John Dewey. Quote, "There is no God and there is no soul. Hence, there is no need for the props of traditional religion. With dogma and creed excluded, then immutable truth, if dead and buried. There is no room for fixed and natural law or permanent moral absolutes." Oh, that's where they're bringing us? So that's where progressive education is bringing us today? To a place where there's no natural law? To a place where there's no permanent moral absolutes? That's how Joe Biden was able to declare March 29th, 2024 as Transgender Day of Visibility. Because the man has no moral center. There is no natural law, and there will be no permanent moral absolutes. And John Dewey was guiding the public school system to produce that in our children. I have to say, he's been very successful. Is this to the good and betterment of America? You be the judge. What a radical change it is from where we started. In 1643, just to illustrate that, in 1643, in the Articles of Confederation of the United Colonies, the Articles of Confederation of the United Colonies in 1643, this is what it says, quote, "We all came into these parts of America with one and the same end and aim, namely, to advance the kingdom of our Lord Jesus Christ and to enjoy the liberties of the gospel in purity with peace." That's where we came from. And even as late as 1856, in the U.S. House of Representatives, which is the House of the People, the U.S. House of Representatives in 1856 officially made this statement, quote, "The great vital and conservative element in our system is the belief of our people in the pure doctrines and divine truths of the gospel of Jesus Christ." 1850s. In 1892, the U.S. Supreme Court declared in Holy Trinity Church versus the United States, they declared that America, quote, "is a Christian nation," end quote. Now, you can argue whether that should be or not, but that's how we felt about it. That was 1892. And in the 1970s, 9 out of 10 Americans identified as Christians. We fast forward to 2024 and Joe Biden's proclamation. Dewey got his work done. This evil came from someplace. No, I can't go through all the history of the public school system. It's just too broad. I got an article here by Alex Newman entitled How John Dewey Used Public Education to Subvert Liberty. And he says Dewey wanted to fundamentally transform the United States. He wanted it to look more like the Soviet Union, in fact. To do that, he believed a total transformation of education and society was required. Literally, quoting Dewey, changing the conception of what constitutes education. And he wrote this in his work entitled The Relation of Theory to Practice in Education in 1904. And he called for, quote, a new social order. That's the purpose of public education, a new world order. He called it a new social order. And John Dewey said we need, too much emphasis has been on reading, writing, and arithmetic. He said it. He spelled it out. I got to give you the Reader's Digest version. He spelled it out. Too much reading, writing, and arithmetic produces a society that's capitalist and bourgeois and oppressive. So we need to get rid of the reading, writing, and arithmetic, and in the early years of education, teach them social obedience is what it boils down to what we tell them is the right way to think and live their lives. Never mind reading, writing, and arithmetic. Tell me that hasn't been going on. Tell me he didn't do it. We're told Dewey worked fiendishly to continue the severing of American and Western education's Christian roots. The process was launched by Owen, the Welsh communist, whose commune in Indiana failed. It formally took root under Horace Mann in Massachusetts, another loser, when he imported the Owen-inspired Prussian model of education. Oh, brother. But that was all to be just the beginning. By the time Dewey and his disciples worked their magic, the scheme would culminate in a nation in which the overwhelming majority of high school seniors violently reject the biblical worldview in which most young people describe themselves as socialists. And then later we read, because I got to keep moving here, writing in the far-left magazine New Republic, Dewey provided, now he's the father of the progressive educational movement. I think he died like in the 1950s. Dewey provided glowing reports about the communist system being imposed upon the people of the Soviet Union. He praised them. He was especially pleased with its so-called education system. Oh, brother. You mean under, what, Stalin? Celebrating the way it was instilling, quote, a collectivist mentality. See, he was lauding the collectivistic mentality of the educational system of Joseph Stalin's communist Soviet Union. Let that sink in. And this you can find in his work entitled Impressions of Soviet Russia and the Revolutionary World, published in 1929. Oh, published in 1929? So that may have... Well, yeah, no. I'll read this last quote from Dewey. We're told, an astute operator, Dewey recognized that the liberty-minded and overwhelmingly Christian teachers, taxpayers, and parents of America of that era would never knowingly support his radical educational and political ambitions if they understood them. Quote, this is Dewey, change must come gradually. To force it unduly would compromise its final success by favoring a violent reaction. If we come clean with what we're doing, there'll be a violent reaction by parents and God-fearing people. So we got to do this surreptitiously, deceitfully, and under the radar and incrementally. This is why we have Transgender Day of Visibility 2024. Now, let's see what the time is. Oh my. I got to go to Ezekiel 1. Wow, time flew by. I'm not even going to have time to get to Romans 1, which is where all this ends up. See, I'm entitling this, what am I entitling this? Trans-evil, cultural Marxism, and divine reprobation. Well, divine reprobation you find in Romans 1. Read Romans 1. It shows you how sodomites come into being. Well, let me read Ezekiel chapter 1 in the light of this transgender day of visibility. And I already read for you from Deuteronomy. A man should not put on woman's clothes, and a woman should not wear men's clothing. It's an abomination to the Lord. Now, in Ezekiel chapter 1, let me read verses 26 through 28. Do we still have free speech in America? We supposedly do. I hope you're hearing these words. Verse 26, Ezekiel 1. And above the firmament that was... No, see, Ezekiel has a vision of the Lord in heaven. And I'm jumping in the middle here. He's describing his vision of the Lord in heaven. And he says, and above the firmament that was over their heads was the likeness of a throne, as the appearance of a sapphire stone. And upon the likeness of the throne was the likeness as the appearance of a man above, upon it, on the throne. Well, that would be God. And I saw as the color of amber, as the appearance of fire round about within it, from the appearance of his loins even upward, and from the appearance of his loins even downward. Fire, a throne in heaven, fire. God on the throne. And I saw as it were the appearance of fire, and it had brightness round about. This is a fearsome sight. As the appearance of the bow that was in the cloud in the day of rain, so was the appearance of the brightness round about. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. All capitals, the tetragrammaton, the I am. And when I saw it, I fell upon my face, and I heard a voice of one that spoke. Now, Ezekiel has just described for us the fire that surrounds and envelops the throne of Jehovah God in heaven, and Jehovah sits on the throne, the Lord Almighty, the I am. And with the fire, which is fearsome, there's also the bow that is in the cloud in the day of rain, a rainbow. A rainbow. You have both fire and a rainbow. You have God's wrath, and you have God's mercy and love. This is all part of the manifestation of the glory of God. The rainbow is a symbol of the glory of God. God made a covenant with Noah that he would never flood the earth again with water and destroy all mankind. And to confirm that covenant, he sent the rainbow, the symbol of God's covenant with Noah. The rainbow symbolizing God's covenant. Here, the rainbow symbolizing the glory of God on his throne. And then the sodomites come along and say, the rainbow represents us. And now we're going to teach it to your children, and they're sexually repressed, and so let's send the transgenders in and groom them. Let's parade them and sashay them with the trans community, and they can walk down the catwalk with men dressed like women that are half naked, and put dirty books with vulgar descriptions in them, and lie to their parents, and promote gender mutilation, and call it education. God help us. God help us. Jim Gallagher reminding you in the words of our blessed Lord and Savior, You shall know the truth shall make you free.